Alright, so here is the rest of the section 5 for the Flutter Expense Tracker app as well as the ToDo app that was completed. So what was added into the expense tracker was a dark mode, which you implement through using the app's dark theme, and you actually are able to implement different colors and backgrounds into this Flutter app so that it's still legible and readable to see even with a different color theme. As well as when you swipe away to get rid of one of the expenses, there's a red bar that comes up that covers up where the actual tracker would be to show that it's being deleted. And when you swipe away, there's a little notification at the bottom that allows you to actually bring back the expense that you decided to delete. As well as when you rotate the phone, the actual app will recognize this and reconfigure itself so that it fits on the phone in the way that it was turned so that nothing is cut off, as well as showing everything and making sure everything looks great. And when you flip the phone back, you reconfigure yourself again back to what it should look like. So actually looking at this app, the dark mode theme was implemented in the main.dart file, which used the theme data.dark, which is what I used, which is using a package from Flutter that actually allowed me to use the dark theme. And basically, instead of using just K color scheme to actually implement all the different colors I would use, instead I used K dark color theme to actually implement to use the dark mode. Using that, I used the get second container to actually for colors it needs to use for less emphasis, as well as for the background and foreground color, I use the K dark color scheme on the primary container. And that was how the dark mode was actually implemented in. Now going over to the expenses data, the expenses.dart file. Going over here, you can see for the actual expenses, here was where we used for the app bar to actually show for the add expense overlay, as well as when the snack bar, which is right here, which is in the remove expense function, being able to actually use a scaffold messenger to actually show the snack bar. And in the snack bar, basically, it allows you to make little pop-up notifications that you can configure to actually undo or show a notification. And this is where I used for the duration of 3 seconds. So that's how long the notification would come up for. This you would also implement a text file or a text string that would tell you what you want. So I put expense deleted, and you can set the snack bar action. That way, when you do on press, so when you actually click on one of the buttons on the snack bar, for this I called the undo button, and basically what it would do, it would set the state of the register expense, then basically bring back the expense that was previously deleted. Moving over to the new expense.dart file. Right here, this is where I used a row function to actually use for the drop down button as well as the drop down menu item. And scrolling up a bit here, we have the actual size box, and which was used for the actual width of the phone. So that way, once the phone was actually rotated, all of the functions and the files that were in the expense tracker would actually fill up the page. So that way it wouldn't overfill or make sure things weren't out of line when it actually turned the page, or turned the phone, I should say. Now in the chart.dart file, this was where I implemented the actual chart that's seen in the top of the app, where it has a bar for each expense that's being used. So here I use the edge insets all in edge insets.symmetric to actually make sure that the actual bar for the chart actually looks correct and is properly placed on the app. Going a bit down, we actually have for the border radius dot circular, which made it just basically just rounded, made a rounded border basically. And here I use theme dot of context for the color scheme, basically for an opacity to actually make it a bit see-through on the actual app, so that you can see a bit more in case if it's too dark on using dark mode, or if you're on light mode, you can see a bit see-through just to make it look a bit better. And going a bit down, we actually have for the row, I use a row for the edge inset symmetric for the actual horizontal when it's getting turned, And this is for color is dark mode. This was what I was using for the opacity, because when it's in dark mode, everything can be a bit darker. So use opacity to actually just make it a bit lighter and actually be able to make it more legible to the people using it. And that was everything that was implemented inside for the expenses app. And moving over to the to-do app. Now for this app, this was basically a somewhat like a notes slash reminders page that shows you different events that you needed to do. So it would give you 3 different options. And after that, it would allow you to check off some of them, and you could put them in an ascending or descending order. And when it did that, it would make sure to actually keep the same state of each different checked off uh, note. So if we actually look at the app here, we have the Flutter to do, and you have explore the courses, learn Flutter, and practice Flutter. And these are the to do actual tokens that you can click on. So let's say you wanted to practice Flutter and you've done it already. So once you've done that, it shows a little check mark to show that you've done it. And if you actually click on sort descending and change it to sort ascending, it would actually keep the check mark that it's on for the practice Flutter and wouldn't change up and get confused on which check mark it should be on. Now to do that, we actually had in the main.dart file, we had the numbers for 1, 2, and 3, basically using the run app. And this is where I had to import the package keys, which I'll get into a bit later. But this is where basically just got for the home page, just the using a widget to actually run the theme data, as well as an app bar and using the text flutter to do. And this is where I use keys, which will basically be used to actually make sure that all the checked off to do marks actually keep track of which address they're actually supposed to be connected to, so that way it doesn't get confused when you actually switch the order up. Now here in the UI updates demo, this was over here using the edge insets, using the main axis and cross axis alignment, basically for the axis size, being able to fill in for all of the different parts in the app, make sure the size, make sure it fits inside of the app, make sure everything's lined up properly. Now here in the demo buttons.dart file, here this was used right here, so we can go and actually rerun this right here. And while that's being built up, I can actually go and check over in the keys.dart file, which is what was used to actually keep track of all the different to-do files, to be able to make sure that it would remember which address each key was attached to. So it would make sure you keep the state in mind, so that when it switches to descending and ascending order, it would still make sure to set itself to the same address that it was already chosen to. As you can see, for clicking on the explore the courses, you can see it keeps the explore the courses, and you can see right here in the debug console, it actually keeps the same, stays on the same emulation right here. But looking into the keys.dart file, actually, you see the change order sets using a set state for the order actually has ascending, descending, ascending. And if you look right here in this widget that's right below, It allowed for the actual for sorting, and using on press on change order, it would be able to equal the order for ascending or descending. And above here, you can see for the actual keys state, which extended to the keys file, this would have using a var for order. We had a constant to do for learning Flutter, practicing Flutter, and exploring other courses. And this basically allowed, this was what was used to actually make sure that it would keep track of which function was actually being used to keep track of the actual state that each key was set to. Now in here in the to-do item.dart file, here we had the priority enum using urgent, normal, and low, which was used for the keys under each of the different to-do function. And here we used a widget to say if the priority was actually urgent, then we'd have an icon for an active. And if it was normal, then we just had the icons for the list. And this was using a stateless widget. We have to use a final string for the actual text that way, and for a priority, so that it would keep track of which one would actually be called, which of the text strings would actually be considered a priority, and make sure to keep that as a stagnant and unchangeable function. And after going through that, you're able to use the checkable to do item, which basically said set if the function was checked off, meaning the priority, normal, high, or low. If any of those states were actually checked off, then it would check to see if it was false. If not, then we'll go through here using the widget to actually check on the icons to see which notification was active and which one was normal. And this was just using for the cross alignment to actually just center the actual wording and the different to-do items that were on there. And up here, here's the state, and you're again using the final string text and priority. And that was everything that was in the to-do app.